Hello class, it's another Python session. So this is our lesson 5 in Python, and today we are going to, in this lesson we are going to be examining functions. So lesson objectives. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to understand what functions are and the benefits of using functions. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to recognize some common built-in Python functions. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to create your own function and call it. Give parameters to it if needed. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to create simple projects using the knowledge gained. So what are functions? Functions in Python are self-contained blocks of reusable code designed to perform specific tasks. They promote code organization, reusability, and modularity, making programs easier to read, maintain, and debug. For instance, if you are to print names, right, you have to be using the print function over and over again. Now, function actually makes your code, it reduces the rate of repetition in your codes, right? So what are the benefits of using functions? Code reusability. So functions helps us to avoid writing the same code multiple lines. So with when you create functions, it can be used to automate, right, to do some things over and over again without having to repeat lines of codes. Then for modularity, functions breaks down complex programs into smaller manageable units. The project we are going to carry out, the simple project we are going to carry out at the end of this lesson will help to highlight this. Then for readability, functions improves code clarity and understanding. It improves code clarity and understanding. You'll be able to understand code better. Then for maintainability, functions make it easy to modify and update specific parts of the code. So what are the types of functions we have? In Python, we have built-in functions, right? There are some predefined Python functions. They are predefined in Python and they are readily available for use. You don't need to import it, right? You don't need to import all these kinds of functions. They are readily available to be used. For instance, the print function, the len functions, the sum function, int functions, str function, that's string to convert to string. All these functions, you don't need to import additional lines of code. You know, functions are just a portion of code that you can use all over again. So these ones too, they were actually built into Python. They are portions of code that does something, right? So they were built into Python. Input also is a function. Whenever you see you see a word like this and you see this open and close brackets like this, it is most likely a function. It's either a function or a method. Now we talk about method when we get into methods are used in the case of object-oriented programming. That's beyond the scope of this course, right? That's beyond the scope of this course. So but whenever you see this, say a word like this with these brackets, open and close brackets, it's most likely a function. We also have functions that are imported from libraries, right? When you import a library, that function comes with it, like the random .randint function, which is used to generate random integers within a range, right? So whenever you import the module random, or the library rather, modules can also be called libraries. So whenever you import it, it comes with this random integer function comes with it. Then this math, this square root, it comes with the math library. When you import maths, you import maths. Let me explain what I'm trying to say. Let me just open my online IDE, online Python IDE. Okay. So if you import math, you can use the square root function, square root. You use math dot square root of 25. We are going to print that, or you just assign it to a variable. You can say square root equals to this. You can just print it, print square root. It's going to get it for you, 5.0. Right. Okay, so let's go back to our lessons. So likewise, the tk inter dot tk is also a function that comes with the tk inter library. Right. We also have the user defined functions. Now these functions are the ones created by the programmer, right, which is me and you in this case, right? These functions are the ones that you create while you are coding. You can create your own functions, you can create your own functions. So you do that using the def keyword. So defining a function, that's when when you want to create a function, you define it with the keyword def. Remember, keywords, those are words that you cannot use as a variable name or as the name of any identifier. So you use def, then you put the name of your function. Like for instance here, def my function, then you put this parenthesis and then you put a colon. Now after the colon, after the colon, if you press enter, Python will automatically indent the first line of code. Like if I say def my function, and I put the opening and close parenthesis, and I put this, don't forget to put your colon. It's very important. It's very important. If you press enter, you see that Python automatically indents the line of code that follows. Right now, that is to show you that the lines of code following will be the block of code under this function. That's the umbrella. Now this function is the umbrella that covers every line of code that follows. So if I type random stuff like this, now if I come outside like this, whatever I type here now is already outside of this function scope. So all these are under this function, but this is no longer under this function. That's why you see this line here like this. So indentation is very important in Python. Even when you are using your if, elif, else, if you remember, you are using your if name equals okay. If you press enter, you see that it's automatically indents it. If you have to run, let me just show you something. Let me say name equals John. If name equals John, print true. Now what happens if I do like this and try to run the code? You see it says indentation error, because after if statement there's supposed to be an indentation for the next line of code. So if I run this should work pretty fine. So true. So just like the way it works in conditional statements like if, elif, else, and also it works also in indentation is also important in loops, for loops and while loops. You also indent, because anytime you have this colon like this, the next line of code will be indented by Python automatically. So also for function. Okay, now calling a function. Now to execute the code within a function, it must be called by its name followed by parentheses. Let me show you what I mean. If you define a function now, if you def greet, let's call this greet, right? I'm going to print hello user. Okay, now if you want this function, if you run this, you're not going to get anything. You're not going to get any what do we call it, output. Why? Because you have not called the function. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to exit the this block of code here. You will exit the function, then you call it greet with the parentheses, and then you run the code. It's going to say hello user. So that's how you call functions. Now function parameters and arguments. Now functions can accept input values, which are known as arguments, through parameters defined in the function signature. Now what do you mean by this? Now if I come back here now, I say def greet. Let's say I want the user to I want a name to be entered whenever you are calling this function. I can put a parameter here called name. This is a parameter, right? This parameter is what must be entered before what must be entered into the function as you call it, and then the function will take it as an argument. Whatever is entered there as input by the user will be taken as an argument. So this parameter allows you to input something into this function. So I can say, okay, print printf hello name. So I'm going to call this. Now remember, if I'm calling it, I need to pass in the name of the name argument, right? What happens if I run this without passing in the arguments? You see what's going to happen? There's an error, type error. It says it is missing one required position argument. So let me pass the argument into it. Let me call it Matthew, but then it's going to be a string, right? So we won't get an error. Let me pass Matthew into it, and then you see hello Matthew. So that's how you pass arguments into functions. Alright, return value. So functions can also have what we call return value, right? This can be used by calling the code. Now if I define a function called multiply, remember that I will have this multiply. I can now enter maybe a and b, which is representing maybe two integers, right? What am I doing now? Okay, so I'm going to say return a multiplied by b. What it's going to do is that the value of this will be returned, right? The value of this will be returned by the function. So let me now call the function multiply to I don't need to enter any operation again. I will just enter 2 and 3, but then I have to maybe somehow get this. It's going to return the value, but if you don't get it, maybe if you don't enter that to a variable, or you print it, you know you won't be able to use it. It will return a value definitely. So I'm going to insert this into results. So I'm going to print results. So let's run this. So it gives 6. So whatever you pass into this, if I pass 4, 5, it's going to multiply it and return it. So 20 here. Right. So now we need to understand global variables and local variables. Now, what do you mean by global variables? Now, global variables are declared outside of any function or class definition, and they are accessible from anywhere in the program, including within functions. To modify a global variable inside a function, the global keyword must be used to explicitly indicate that the intent is to modify the global variable, not to create a new local one with the same name. Let me just show you what global variables are. Now, if you say a equals 23 and you define the function dev show number, and you say print a. Now if I call the function show number, remember it has no parameter, so I don't need to enter any parameter into these brackets. So if I call the function, I'm definitely going to get an error. Oh, that's not what I mean actually. Let me show you what I mean. What I mean is that, let's say I declare this now, a equals to 23, right, under this show number, and then I'm here and I want to print a. This is what I mean actually. So sorry for the confusion earlier. So if I declare this a under this function, and now I'm trying to access it here, if I run this, I'm going to get an error. Why? It says name a is not defined. Why does it say it's not defined? This is because this a is a local variable, right? It is local to this function show number. It is not a variable that is it's not a variable that is used throughout this whole code. It is only used under this variable. It is only under the umbrella of this variable. So unless you declare another variable here called a, which is, maybe let's call this one 30. Okay, so this one executes successfully. So now what you need to know is that global variables are available for functions to use, right? Functions can use the global variables, but the local variables, the variables local to a function, cannot be used anywhere in the code, just like that, unless you call the function and you assign it to it. Okay, so we said local variables are declared inside a function or a block of code, right? They are only accessible now, not just functions. When you talk of while loops and for loops also, they also have local variables, because any variable that is declared, any variable that is declared under a block of code, be it function, be it loops or conditionals, is a local variable. It is not available everywhere in the code, right? So once the function or block finishes execution, local variables are destroyed and their memory is released. So that's that about that. Let's get into work. Let's quickly create a mini project just to test knowledge on this now. So we already know how to declare a function, we already know how to call a function, we know how to pass arguments into it using parameters. So now we want to create a grade calculator, right? A grade calculator that can be used in a school. So the first thing is we're going to def calculate average. So we are going to define a function called calculate average, and we are going to pass a parameter. We are going to input a parameter to collect arguments for it, scores. So it has the parameter called scores. So it's going to get arguments, a single argument called scores. Now remember, this single argument can be anything. It can be a list, it can be a string. So you know, a list is referred to as one thing. So if you pass a list into it, it will still work well, right? Because a list is still is referred to as an entity. So if you say a group of students, now that is that's already a collection. They are represented as a single unit. I don't know if you get what I'm saying. They are represented as a single unit. So whenever you call a group of students, they are represented as a single unit. So we have defined calculate average, and we have entered this parameter scores, right? So the argument that will be in here is scores. Good. So now we are going to return what? We are going to return the sum. Now, just before we do this, let me show you what sum is. Sum is a built-in function to calculate the sum of numbers. So sum 32 plus 34. Let me print it. Print this. So this sum is just an inbuilt function. It comes pre-installed with Python. You don't need to import it. So it just does the sum of numbers. Oh yeah, there is this is how you should this is when you know what to do. Now I ran this. I just wanted to see how this sum works. That's why I ran it. So you see, it says int object is not iterable. Now whenever you see anything called iterable, now sometimes it is bugs are important at times for you to understand how programming works. Now it says int object is not iterable. Whenever you hear the word iterable just refers to stuff like lists, right, or dictionaries. Okay, list or dictionaries. Okay, these are iterable. Iterables are just sequences, right? Sets of characters that you know, we can loop through, right? Anything you can loop through is an iterable. Like for instance, you can loop through a string, you can loop through lists, you can loop through dictionaries. So those are iterables. So meaning that this sum takes in what? Meaning that this sum takes in only iterables. It takes in only stuff like lists and the likes. So we enter 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you run that, you're going to get again a built-in function or method. Object is not the issue here actually is that we did not put this bracket here. You then put, right, because sum is a function, right? So whenever you use sum, you should put this normal bracket, this parenthesis, this normal brackets. You should put it whenever you are calling any function. So sum is a built-in function. You have to use the parenthesis. Then this is a list. It's going to take a list as an argument. Then remember, print also is a function, so there are two pairs of brackets here, two pairs of parentheses here. This one for print, right, and this one for sum. So if you run it now, there should be no issue. If we run it, there should be no issue. No available resources. What's going on? Sorry, I need to check. Oh, 10. So it sums up everything. 4 plus 3, 7 plus this, making 10. Okay. Alright. So let's come back to our code. So we are going to return the sum of scores. Now if you have to get the average of a set of numbers, you have to add up all the numbers, then you divide by the number of items, meaning that maybe the length of the items. So that's why I'm using len scores. Remember that len is used to get the length of a list, the number of items in a list. So we are using sum of scores divided by the length of the list, right? So now I'm going to exit this function, and I'm going to create another function to determine the grade. We can just comment this. We can give this a comment that define a function to calculate average of scores. So we're coming here again. We want to define another function. Define a function to determine the grade based on average score. So remember, we have grading systems like A, B, C, D stuff based on the average score, right? So we're going to define this function def determine grade, and we're going to pass in average. Remember that we want to determine the grade of the person, A, B, C, D, E, or F, based on this average that was calculated. So def determine grade, we're going to pass average. Now you might want to say, why did I not pass this? You cannot just pass when you are defining a function like this, you can't pass this function into it like this unless you are calling. When you are calling the function, you can pass something else to it, but for now you pass, let's just pass a variable called average into it. Now remember, whenever you've finished defining the function, you put this colon here to terminate it. This colon is meant to terminate this creation, so that by the time you press enter, it's going to automatically give indentation. Now remember, grades are A, B, C, D, E, F, right? So we want to determine based on the average score what will be the grade. So we're going to use conditional in this case. If average, that's this average that was passed in, if this average is greater than or equal to 70, normally that's the common grading system, 70 and above for A. That's the one even currently used in our universities. So in most of our universities, so 70 is A. So if the person got 70 and above as the average, we're going to return. We are not printing, we are returning the value, right? Because we are not done, we are still going to create one more function. So we are not printing, we are returning what? We are returning A as a string. returning A. We are returning A. Then elif average. Now if the average is now greater than or equal to 60, if it's greater than or equal to 60, then we are returning B. We are returning B. Then elif average greater than or equal to 50. Now we are returning what? We are returning C. Now elif average greater than or equal to what now? To 40. We are returning D. Again, elif average greater than or equal to 30. We are returning what? We're returning E. Now the only grade left will be F, so we can just use else, since that's the final condition. Else we are returning what? We are returning F, meaning that if all these have been satisfied, then the others will be when it is less than 30 and below. So return F. So now we are done with this function. Let's terminate it. Let's come to the end of that. So now we are creating the final function here. Now define a function, to do what now? To display results Alright, so now what are we doing here right now? Now let's dev this. So dev display results. We're not passing anything into that. We are going to get all the inputs here like this. So dev display results. Now average. Remember that we are going to use average here, right? We are going to use this average to check whether this is greater than this, whatever. We're going to use this average at this point, and then so that's why we are declaring it here, that average equals calculate average. Now we are you remember that if this function here calculates the average, is going to return this, right? The value is returning. We are now taking it by calling this function and assigning the return value to this variable. Let me repeat that. Now this calculates average will sum these scores and then divide it over by the length. Now it's going to return a value, the value of this. Now the value we are taking is by calling this function, and then we're now putting that in this variable called average. So calculate average. And remember, we are passing something into it, because whenever we are calling this calculate average, we have to pass the scores into it. Scores, right? Scores. Good. Scores. Now grade equals determine grade. Then we are passing average into it. So we are calling this determine grade also, and then we are giving the return value to this grade. So these grades, these return values will be this 70, 60, whatever is going to return it to this. First, we are going to this first variable, this calculate average. We do this average calculation, and based on the scores inputted, and we give the value to this variable and store it. and then we are going to use it to determine average on this average that was calculated on this average variable. We're going to use this determine grade, and then we assign it to this variable called grade. Now what do we now want to do next? We have from what we have done all the calculations, the necessary calculations. The next thing to do is to print out the results. Now print. Okay, I'm going to use an F string here. Print student student, then I'm going to insert this a student's name, right? Name. Now just before I do this, remember we need to here we want to print the student's name, then the scores, but we need to pass something to this display result so that it will use whatever we give it to carry out these tasks, calculate average and whatever. Now the name, we are going to pass two arguments, name, then scores, name and scores. Now remember that these scores must be an iterable like lists. So it must be something like a list that will be evaluated. Then okay, so this is student and the name of the student. Print the name of the student. Then we are printing what again? We are printing the scores. The scores first. We are printing the scores. Printing the scores. Okay, after that, what else are we printing? We are printing the average. Printing the average. Okay, we're printing the average. Then guess what we're printing next? The final one, that will be grade. That will be grade. Okay, all right, so now we have asked this to print out this. Now can you guys just guess what we are doing? What will be the final thing here? What have we not done? What are we supposed to do? Well, we have not called this function. We have defined it, but we have not called this. We have to call this function, right? Which we in turn call calculate average while doing this while performing its operation. When you call this display result in its operations has to call calculate average, right? Again, it has to call determine grade. So we have to call one so that this one will call the other. So functions are just like human beings. If you don't call them, they will not do what they are supposed to do. You call them by their name so that they answer and they do whatever you want them to do. So you call this function by its name, display results. Now remember, we have to pass in arguments. If I just run this, I'm going to get an error that it requires positional arguments. So we are going to pass in name and score. So here I'm not going to write name, I'm going to write the real name of the student. I'm going to write, let's say, James, for instance, comma, then I'm going to put the scores. Scores should be a list because it's not going to perform scores as it's not going to do this sum correctly if we don't pass something like a list. So I'm going to pass a list into it. and say 20, 30, 40. So if I run this code, they say James, for this student James, the guy got 20 in a subject, 30 and 40, then the average is 30.0 and the grade is E. So I hope you guys understood this. So we'll still meet in the live class so that we can properly discuss. But then just before we round off, I want us to extend these projects. Let's make some few adjustments. Let's just make it better. Let's find a way to improve it. What if I don't want to assign, you know, this one now we only work for if you just if you call the function, you have to just enter the name as you call it. What if you want the user to manually enter something as an input? What if you want to use input and want to get the scores for the subject from the user? Now this is what we are going to do. We're going to do something here. It's not tricky, it's not that tricky. So what we are going to do is that I'm going to declare variables, and then so variable name equals what? Input. Name equals input. So the user will manually enter the name. It will get the name from the user. Enter, I'm going to say enter student name. Oh, sorry. Enter student's name. Can we have this? Then scores. For now, let's just create an empty list for the scores. Right now, what we want to do is that we don't know how many subjects the student did, so we are going to use a while loop so that it will allow for as many number of scores as possible. Right now, we're going to get the number of subjects from the user. Maybe the user is a teacher, so you can say number of subjects equals int, because we are going to do a mathematical calculation on that, a kind of evaluation. We're going to evaluate that. That's why I'm converting this to an integer by default at the beginning. So I'm converting this to an integer. So I say input so we type enter the number of subjects, the number of subjects that we want to add, we want to calculate the average. Now we are going to declare another variable called n. We are going to assign the value 0 for our while input to work, right? So n equals 0. Okay, so while true, we're going to say no, not while true, right? Because while true we only run infinitely. So we want to say while n is less than the number of subjects. Now currently the number of subjects is 0, right? Now, and we are going to be incrementing that actually. So while n is less than the number of subjects, so if the number of subjects is 1 that was entered, so it will check, okay, 0 is less than 1, so it will run. Now while n is less than the number of subjects, we want to say subject score equals int input. Okay, now I'm going to use an f string in this input. I'm going to use an f string subject, okay, int input, enter, okay, subject, enter subject score. So subject score equals to this, enter subject score. Now I'm going to put I'm going to dynamically put a stuff here. I'm going to do a dynamic insertion. Remember dynamic insertion by using f string. So I'm going to put n plus 1, meaning that if the value of n is 0, that will be plus 1. That's the first one will be what? This will be enter subject 1 score, because currently n is 0. That will be enter subject 1 score. Enter subject 1 score. So after that, I'm now going to increment the value of n, right? So that by the time it's checking whether n is less than the number of subjects. So if the number of subjects is 2, the first time it runs is 0 now. So subject score, so this is 0 plus 1, that's enter subject 1 score. Then after doing that, it will save it in this variable called subject score. Then it will now do what? It will now increment the number by 1. It will increment the number by 1. So, but remember, all these subject score, we want to store them inside this list. So we are now going to append. We are going to say scores dot append what now? We are going to append subject score that we just collected. We are appending subject score that we just collected. Append subject score. So meaning that, okay, collect this subject score from user, for the first subject. After collecting it, increment this n, but then add the subjects we collected to this list. So, and this will continue to run as long as we have not reached the total number of subjects, right? So I'm going to comment all these codes after the end. Okay, so as usual, remember all these that we are doing, all this while loop and so on, it is still under this function display results, right? We have only removed these parameters. Now this average and grade is going to work as usual. It's going to work as usual. Okay, now that we have done this, I want us to call our function. That's the display results. Display results. Now this time around we are not passing anything to it because we have removed that. Okay, we have asked it not to ask for any argument. So if I run this now, I'm going to go enter student's name. I'll enter James. Okay, enter the number of subjects. The number of subjects, maybe 5 subjects. Enter subject 1 score, maybe 55. Subject 2 score 45. Subject 3 score maybe 52. Subject 4 score 98, and subject 5 score 57. So it says student James scores, these are the scores, then the average is 61.4 and the grade is B. The grade is B. So that's just it. So there are some other, now this code is not what am I going to call it now? What's this grammar? This code, we cannot say it is actually very perfect as it is. There are still some things you can do. You can still add this exception handling, so that if somebody enters the wrong kind of score, maybe that will be one of the projects of the week. So I will drop that also on the group. That will be dropped on the group. So thank you so much for joining. So I hope you understand this code. If you don't, we will meet together in the live class.